My husband arrogantly brought his mistress into our home, believing I was weak. Instead of breaking down, I quietly planned my revenge, gathering undeniable evidence of his betrayal and financial crimes. When the moment was right, I exposed everything, leaving him humiliated, jobless, and alone. His betrayal taught me strength, independence, and true freedom. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of personal growth and empowerment. I remember everything about that evening. The way he walked into the living room like a man announcing a business merger, not the destruction of a marriage. Daniel always had a flair for performance-tailored suit, wine glass in hand, voice smooth as velvet. He stood across from me, watching for a reaction. "I think it's time we stop pretending," he said. "Vivian will be staying here, with us." Us. I let the words settle between us like dust. He expected the usual tears, shouting, maybe even a broken plate or two. But all I did was take a slow sip of my wine and say, "Okay." He blinked, as if I'd spoken in a language he didn't understand. "Did you hear me?" he asked, smugness faltering. "I did," I said, keeping my voice level. "And I'm fine with it." I could see the confusion flicker in his eyes. And beneath it, the faintest trace of fear. What he didn't know and would never have guessed was that I had already known for months. The perfume that wasn't mine. The late meetings, the sudden generosity with flowers and guilt-drenched silences. I'd seen it all before, and this time I had paid attention. But I didn't confront him. No, I planned. That same night, after he went to bed, undoubtedly messaging her, I opened the drawer of my desk. There was a quiet satisfaction in the cool weight of the USB drive tucked inside. Hours of footage, phone call recordings, financial documents that proved his secrets went deeper than Vivian. Daniel thought I was weak because I didn't fight back right away. But he mistook my silence for surrender, when really, it was the sound of my strategy forming. And as he drifted to sleep upstairs in our bed one he had already soiled with betrayal. I stayed downstairs, staring into the glow of my laptop, quietly moving the first pieces of a game he didn't even know he was playing. People often mistake silence for surrender. Daniel certainly did. In the days that followed his smug announcement, he walked around the house with the air of a man who believed he'd won. He'd flash practiced smiles at me during breakfast, make casual comments like, "Vivian prefers the other coffee blend, hope you don't mind we switch," and would hum to himself as if he were already living in the victory he assumed I wouldn't contest. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even flinch. I simply watched and remembered. I remembered the first time I caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirt. The way he laughed at a text message and locked his phone immediately after. The sudden increase in client dinners that didn't align with his calendar. At first, I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But doubt, once planted, has a way of growing into something stronger than trust. The moment that sealed it for me came on a Sunday afternoon. He was in the shower, his phone buzzing insistently on the bathroom counter. One name popped up again and again. Vivian. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I already knew. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, long after he'd gone to bed, staring into the last inch of red wine in my glass. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. There was no dramatic breakdown, just a quiet shift. A line drawn, invisible but irreversible. I told no one. Not even Olivia, my closest friend. I didn't need comfort. I needed control, so I got to work. Over the next few weeks, I met discreetly with a private investigator in a coffee shop across town. His name was Mark, mid-40s, calm voice, no questions asked. Within days, he delivered the first photos. Daniel and Vivian holding hands in a parking garage, her hand brushing his tie in a bar. More followed: hotel receipts, security footage, even a few voice recordings from when they got careless. At home, I began installing things Daniel never noticed. A small camera behind the bookshelf in his study, a second one in the corner of our bedroom. I even updated the router. He thought it was for speed, but it was for surveillance access. Parallel to the evidence, I began shifting our finances. We had a joint account one he assumed I wouldn't touch, but the prenuptial agreement he once shrugged off gave me quiet leverage. With a few transfers here, some strategic reallocation there, I moved most of our shared assets into secure holdings that belonged only to me. Legally, irreversibly. There was a part of me, once, that might have cried through this process, that might have mourned the man I married, the life we built. But that version of me had disappeared the moment he looked me in the eye and told me he was bringing her into our home. And still, I said nothing. Let him enjoy his imagined dominance. Let him think I was numb, helpless, indifferent. Let him believe he was in control. Because every quiet nod, every small smile, every silent evening I spent sipping wine was one step closer to the day I'd take it all back. By the time Vivian started leaving traces of herself in my home, her perfume lingering in the hallway, her shoes at the edge of the front door, her laugh echoing in my living room, I had already locked in every piece of my plan. Daniel, of course, assumed I was too broken to care. He confused stillness with surrender. And that was his fatal mistake. I started with the finances. While he was busy entertaining Vivian, I sat in my office, organizing accounts under my name, legally sound, quietly executed. The prenup he once signed, half drunk on arrogance and champagne, became my shield. At the time, he'd called it a formality. Now it was ironclad. I transferred our joint investments into protected holdings, restructured our property ownership through a clause he'd never bothered to read, and froze the credit cards connected to my name. Everything he thought he could claim slipped silently from his grasp before he even realized it. Next came the surveillance. The cameras I had installed gave me a perfect view of the world Daniel thought he controlled. I watched from my laptop as they laughed over wine in our kitchen, sat too close on our couch, and whispered like children playing house. Vivian played the role of the playful, doe-eyed interloper, utterly unaware she was being recorded from 5 different angles. But I wasn't just recording intimacy. I was capturing behavior, incriminating conversations, financial collusion. Vivian making comments about funny money, Daniel moved to cover her debts. It wasn't just an affair anymore. It was intent, pattern, violation. What they didn't know was that I wasn't acting alone. There was Mark, the PI, who had already built a timeline of their affair. And there was Eliza, my former law school roommate, now an associate in a boutique firm specializing in corporate misconduct and domestic legal protection. She reviewed the footage, the documents, the audio clips. Her reaction was simple. This is airtight. And then, there was the detail Daniel had truly forgotten about his past. Several years ago, he was given a quiet sentence of probation for a DUI that had involved a minor accident. I had pulled every string to make it disappear from public view, mostly for his career. And like most things he took for granted, he never thanked me. But now that sealed record was my last card. Because inviting Vivian to stay in our home while drinking heavily and hosting unregistered guests, that wasn't just tasteless. It was a violation. I didn't need to lie. I didn't need to invent anything. I just needed to report the truth to the right department under the right name at the right time. And I would. Soon. For now, I just sat at the edge of the bed we no longer shared, laptop in my lap, documents open beside me, a glass of wine at my side. Calm, cold, controlled. Daniel thought he was building a new life. He didn't know I was already dismantling his, piece by silent piece. Daniel never noticed how quiet I had become. To him, silence was permission. My calm was complicity. The stillness in our home was just the background to his arrogance. So when I told him I had a business trip coming up, he didn't even blink. He nodded absently while buttoning his shirt. How long? 3 nights, I replied, placing a file into my leather bag. I'll be in Chicago. He didn't ask which hotel or which client. He just smiled slightly. "That gives us some space," he said, not even hiding the subtext. I looked at him, and for a moment, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he truly believed he'd orchestrated the moment. He didn't realize he had just stepped into mine. That morning, I left the house just before 7 a.m. I wore a blazer, heels, carried a travel bag with exactly 3 blouses, a makeup kit, and an old laptop I hadn't touched in years. I drove to a different part of the city, far from where Daniel's world operated. I checked into a small, discreet boutique hotel under my legal name. The receptionist didn't ask questions. I requested a room with strong Wi-Fi and a window facing east. Inside, I unpacked. Not the clothes, but my tools. I set up my laptop, routed a private VPN to my secured home surveillance network, and opened the 5 live feeds that had quietly recorded our lives over the past 2 months. Living room, kitchen, bedroom, his study, hallway. Every angle was perfect. That evening, Daniel returned home. Not alone. Vivian entered with him, confidently, like a woman claiming territory. She carried a small overnight bag. She kissed him in the hallway, giggled, kicked off her heels, and made herself comfortable. She opened a bottle of red from our wine cellar, the one I'd picked for our anniversary last year, and poured 2 glasses. They toasted. To freedom, to conquest, to ignorance. I watched in silence. No shaking hands, no racing heart. Just the click of a keyboard as I time-stamped the footage and saved it to a backup drive. Around 11:42 p.m., I picked up the burner phone I'd purchased 2 weeks earlier from a cash-only kiosk. The number had never been used. The SIM was untraceable. I dialed the contact I had saved under a simple alias. "Miller, probation office." A woman answered. "Probation services. Officer Miller speaking." I softened my voice just enough. "Hello, I need to report a violation." Her tone shifted instantly, prepared to log a formal complaint. "The individual's name is Daniel Ward. He's currently violating his probation, alcohol consumption, overnight guests, and questionable financial activity. I believe his address is already on file." There was a pause. "Can I ask who's calling?" "I prefer to remain anonymous," I replied. "But I have documented proof. You'll find what you need if you check his residence tonight." Her voice changed. Serious now. "Understood." I ended the call, removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and dropped it into the toilet. Then I turned back to the screen. Vivian had fallen asleep on the couch. Daniel stood by the fireplace, swirling wine, smug and content in his fantasy life. That was when the flashing lights came. 12:19 a.m. The doorbell rang. Once, then again, louder. Then the pounding started. I watched as Daniel opened the door and froze. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. Calm, professional. One asked for his ID. The other stepped inside. Vivian appeared, confused and half-dressed, asking what was going on. And then came the moment. Daniel's wrist twisted behind his back. Handcuffs clicked into place. Vivian screamed. Daniel shouted something about this being a mistake. The officers didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. They had authority. And now they had motive. I leaned back in the hotel chair, folded my arms, and exhaled. No smile, no triumph, just control. Everything he thought I didn't know, every lie he believed I was too weak to confront, was now cataloged, labeled, time-stamped, and delivered to the very system he once used to intimidate others. This wasn't revenge. It was precision. It was structure. It was the soft echo of consequences catching up to a man who never thought they would. And I was already writing the next move. By the time I returned home the next morning, the neighborhood was already humming. People didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. The flashing red and blue lights from the night before had done the talking for me. I walked past a few familiar faces, Mrs. Doran from across the street. the retired couple who always walked their golden retriever at 7:30 sharp. They nodded stiffly, politely, but their eyes lingered just a bit too long. The whispers would begin before noon if they hadn't already. I stepped into the house. It was quiet. The wine glasses from the night before still sat on the coffee table, lipstick stained. A throw blanket lay twisted on the sofa where they'd collapsed together, pretending they were building something new, something worth destroying our marriage for. And in the center of it all, Daniel sat, disheveled, barefoot, jaw tense, eyes red. He looked up as I walked in, as if expecting, what, sympathy? Shock? "You planned this," he said hoarsely. I set my bag down slowly. "Not last night. Months ago." His face twisted. "You set me up." "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped protecting you." Silence stretched between us. I let it breathe. Let him feel how empty control feels when it finally slips from your hands. Then I walked to the dining table, pulled out a small, slim envelope and slid it across to him. He didn't move to touch it. "What is this?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "Bank transfers, surveillance footage, audio clips, Vivian's history, including the bankruptcy and the fraud charge she never disclosed, and your company's expense reports, the ones you used to cover your little business dinners." He swallowed, his hands finally moving to open the envelope, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the documents. "You wouldn't," he started, but the words died in his throat as he recognized my handwriting on the cover letter. "I already did," I said. He froze. "You sent this to my boss?" "Your boss, your board, your top-tier clients, the firm's ethics committee. Oh, and your parents. They received a shorter version, minus the financial data, but heavy on the bedroom footage." His face drained of color. "You've destroyed me." "No," I said. "I revealed you. There's a difference." He stood, suddenly, knocking over the chair. "You think you're so clever, so cold. This is revenge." "No," I said quietly. "This is consequence." I walked past him, toward the staircase, paused halfway. I said without turning back, if you'd just left, if you'd just walked away, I might have let you keep your dignity." I heard him exhale sharply behind me, part breath, part broken sound. "But instead, you decided to humiliate me in my own home," I continued. "You chose to bring her here to my table, to my bed, and assumed I'd do nothing." I finally turned. "You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You insulted me." He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Upstairs, in the quiet of my room, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the neighborhood return to its routine. Somewhere, someone was already forwarding the video. Somewhere else, a partner was reviewing financial records. And somewhere deep inside Daniel Ward, the man who thought he owned every room he entered, something had finally broken. The first message came just after noon. "Daniel's been removed from the board. Is that true?" It was from a former colleague of his, someone who used to join us for dinner parties and fake laugh at Daniel's recycled jokes. By the end of the day, my inbox was full. Some were subtle. "Rough week for Daniel, huh?" Some not so subtle. "You're a cold-blooded genius. Remind me never to cross you." But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The fallout had taken on a life of its own. Daniel had always built his identity on being the man people trusted. At work, he was the fixer. With clients, he was the closer. With friends, he was the guy with charm and power. Now he was the man whose mistress appeared in blurry surveillance footage whispering about creative accounting. The man who claimed moral authority but couldn't even control his own household. The man whose reputation collapsed not in scandalous headlines but through cold, quiet proof sent in plain brown envelopes. Within 72 hours, he was asked to resign. Within 5 days, major clients withdrew their contracts. By the end of the second week, his accounts had been frozen for investigation. And Vivian? She was gone. No texts, no notes. Just vanished once she realized Daniel no longer had anything to offer. He tried calling her 6 times in one afternoon. I watched him from the window, pacing in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear like it was a lifeline. That night, he showed up at my door. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He looked small. "I have nothing left," he said. I didn't reply. "You proved your point," he added. "You won." I shook my head gently. "Daniel, this was never a game." He exhaled shakily, leaning on the doorframe as if he might collapse. "Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Help me salvage something." I met his eyes. I told the truth. That's all I did. "You destroyed my life." "No," I said, calm and final. "You did." His mouth opened, then closed again. No more arguments, no more arrogance, just silence. He stepped back, then turned and walked away, head down, shoulders hunched. No car, no Vivian, no future he could hold on to. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where he'd stood, the cold air brushing across my skin like closure. For the first time in years, I felt no fear, no confusion, no guilt, just clarity. Daniel had spent years building a life on power, image, and manipulation. And in less than 2 weeks, I had taken it apart with precision, not rage. He didn't just lose his career, his woman, or his money. He lost the version of himself that believed he was untouchable. And me? I finally walked back into the house I owned, alone but not lonely. That night, I slept soundly. No cameras, no calculations, no pretense. Just peace. It was a rainy afternoon when Daniel came back. Not to reclaim anything by then, there was nothing left for him to reclaim. He came with slumped shoulders, a wrinkled coat soaked through at the sleeves, and a face that looked like it hadn't seen sleep in days. I opened the door slowly. For a moment, we just stood there, the sound of the rain between us. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't answer. I simply stepped aside. He entered like a stranger. Not the man who once owned every corner of this house with his presence, but a ghost retracing old footsteps. He didn't sit until I nodded to the chair across from mine. Silence filled the room dense, but not awkward. I sipped my tea. He stared at his hands. "I lost my position at the firm," he said quietly. "Even the consulting gigs are gone." I nodded once. "Vivian blocked me." His voice cracked a little. "She left the city." Still, I said nothing. He looked up, desperate for a flicker of recognition in my eyes. "I have nothing, Emma. No job, no money, no one. I can't even walk down the street without hearing whispers. People who used to praise me now act like they never knew me." My gaze stayed steady. "I came here because—" He paused, searching for the words. "Because I thought maybe you could help me." "How?" I asked. "You're the only one who knows who I really am." "I do," I replied calmly. "That's why I can't help you." His face fell. "I'm sorry, Emma, I really am. I didn't mean to hurt you the way I did. You thought I'd always be here, that I wouldn't fight back, that I was too soft, too small." He closed his eyes, a sharp breath escaping his chest. "I was wrong." "Yes," I said. "You were. I need one person to stand by me right now. I'm drowning." "And what about when I was drowning, Daniel? When I sat across from you at that dinner table and you told me your mistress would be moving in? Did you think I needed someone then?" His eyes welled, but I didn't flinch. "I don't hate you," I continued, my voice even. "But I won't save you. What you're living through now isn't punishment. It's consequence." He looked at me like a man seeing someone for the first time, perhaps the woman I always was, but whom he never truly noticed. After a long pause, he stood. "Take care of yourself," he said weakly. "I already am." He hesitated at the door, then walked out into the rain. This time, I didn't watch him leave. I simply closed the door. There was no satisfaction, no revenge rush, just a quiet stillness. And in that stillness, the final cord between us snapped clean, silent, irreversible. Daniel never came back after that day. Not with a text, not with a letter, not with a plea. And I didn't look for him. I didn't check social media or call mutual friends or wonder where he'd gone. Because somewhere between his final words and the sound of the door closing behind him, something in me had clicked into place. It was done. The war was over. And I had no interest in standing on the battlefield any longer. The next morning, I opened every window in the house. The air was cold, sharp even, but it felt clean. Honest. I let it sweep through the rooms that had once felt suffocating. The curtains moved like breath, like a slow exhale from the bones of the house itself. I gathered what little was left of him: papers he had tucked into drawers, a forgotten cufflink beneath the dresser, an old cologne bottle that still smelled like control, and placed it all in a box. Not with anger, not even with sadness, just clarity. I called a courier to pick it up. No note, no goodbye, just instructions: deliver and do not return. Then I moved on. I contacted my lawyer and finalized the asset separation. Thanks to the prenup, it was straightforward, clean. Daniel wouldn't touch the house. The investments, the retirement account, the art he never cared about but always claimed for show. I called a painter and changed the color of the walls in my bedroom, took down the framed photo in the hallway, bought new sheets, a different scent for the diffuser, and finally replaced the wine glasses I never really liked anyway. The home began to feel different. Not because it was filled with new things, but because it was finally free of what was no longer welcome. That same week, I donated a stack of old books Daniel had bought to look impressive but never read. In their place, I set up a shelf of novels and poetry I'd once loved but abandoned during our marriage. I started reading again, late into the night. Some evenings, I sat by the window, with a blanket and tea, watching the sky darken without needing to check where he was or what time he'd be home. There was a kind of silence that used to terrify me. Now I welcomed it. The phone didn't ring with fake apologies. The door didn't open at odd hours. There were no strange perfumes, no misplaced earrings on the floor, no forced smiles at dinners with people who looked through me. There was just me. And that was more than enough. I wasn't healed, not yet. But I was healing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. It wasn't a single moment. There was no cinematic sunrise, no grand epiphany, just a quiet unfolding, subtle, steady, mine. I began waking up early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The silence of the morning didn't haunt me anymore. It soothed me. I'd make coffee, open the windows wide, and let the cool air move through the rooms like breath returning to a body long held still. I didn't rush. I no longer lived by his calendar, his meetings, his moods. For the first time in years, I had space, time. A home that no longer felt like a performance set, but a place that held me. I repainted the hallway a soft dove gray. I planted herbs on the windowsill. I bought a vintage record player and let Nina Simone and Joni Mitchell fill the spaces once thick with silence. I started journaling again. The words were slow to come at first, but they came. And with them came pieces of myself I had buried in compromise. People started noticing. Olivia came by one afternoon with wine and a smirk. "You look different," she said. "Lighter?" I offered. She smiled. Alive. It was true. The woman who once lived in fear of a slammed door or a late text was gone. The version of me that measured her worth by someone else's attention had been dismantled piece by piece, just like I had dismantled him. But unlike Daniel, I hadn't crumbled. I had rebuilt. I didn't need to post about it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My healing wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate, real. I volunteered at a local women's shelter on weekends, nothing dramatic, just helping out, listening. I never told them my story. I didn't need to. I understood their silence, their pauses, their half smiles when they said, "I'm fine." Somewhere along the way, I stopped keeping track of the days since he left. Cheech. And one night, curled up on the couch with a book and a mug of tea, I realized something surprising. I hadn't thought about Daniel in weeks. Not with anger, not with sadness, not even with satisfaction. Just nothing. And in that moment, I knew I was free. Not because he was gone, but because I had come home to myself. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.